Well, it's 5:30. Let's call the meeting to order. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of June the 20th, 2023. Roll call. Let the record reflect that all members are present, including Shawna Mathis, who is on the phone currently on the phone. Shawna is there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. The approval of the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda?
Yes.
If there are no corrections or changes in the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Agenda is approved. Minutes from the previous meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look over the minutes from the previous meeting, which was May the 16th, 2023?
Yes.
Any changes, additions, deletions? Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve.
Motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Report from the code officer.
I don't have anything for the planning commission this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir. Old business, I see no old business at the moment. Under new business, we have item number 1. Request for a conditional use permit, residential use in zoning M1 at 533 Plaza Drive. Mr. Code Officer.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This is a conditional use request for residential use in the M1 zoning district. You can see on the screen behind you is the site plan that was submitted with this request. It's the location of an existing office building and a parking lot located on Plaza Drive. The request before you tonight, though, is to convert this to a residential use, essentially a 4-unit apartment building. The apartment building itself, or the office building itself, was unlawfully converted into an apartment building about a year ago into 4 apartments. This was done without permits or any type of inquiry with the city at all to convert this to a residential use. The use was not discovered until police activity had occurred at the location for serving of warrants, and so the city wasn't even aware this had been done. But in that case, that prompted the need for there being a conditional use request to be made to the city for this use to be allowed. And if you've noted in my report, and I won't go into those details and spare the commission all of the reading of that report, but essentially this could create a harmful precedent in the city by and somehow influencing others in the city to move forward with the creation of apartment buildings without any permits or approvals from the city itself. And this is a photograph of the existing office building that was converted. Some doors were added in the front and rear to accommodate the apartments themselves. But essentially, if you've read the details in the staff report, our recommendation is denial based on the grounds for the fact that this is an office building that was not lawfully converted to an apartment under any sort of building permits or guidelines whatsoever. So we are recommending denial of that request, but we are suggesting that if it's approved, that there be 4 conditions added to the request itself. I'm happy to read those, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like.
Yes, I would.
So if the request is approved by City Council, we are recommending that the following conditions be added: that the property owner shall obtain building permits and comply with all applicable building codes and life safety requirements. The building shall substantially conform to the number of bedrooms and proposed limitations described in the applicant's narrative, regardless of any depictions shown on the floor plan, including in this application. The developer shall reduce the number of designated parking spaces on the site to a total of 8 spaces. The existing additional impervious surface not designated for parking shall be removed and replaced with landscaping and/or grassed areas. And the 4th condition is any change to or modification of the building not included in the applicant's narrative shall result in the conditional use being automatically revoked. That's if the request is approved.
Thanks, sir. I would ask if there was someone present to speak for this request.
There is, Mr. Chairman. My name is Chuck Ross. I'm with the firm of Powell and Edwards in Lawrenceville. We're located Street. And I have the pleasure tonight to represent Mr. Kailash Tandrian, who is the applicant here in this case. Mr. Tandrian is a retired New York Police Department officer who came and moved down to Georgia and became very involved with his church. And I'll have to read this because I don't remember it off my head. But his church is the Rama Krishna Davi Aman Seva Dham Mandir Incorporated. And he's also brought several members of the congregation in support of him and his request for this conditional use permit tonight. Now, let me first tell you that I do a lot of zoning cases, and Mr. Callender has been absolute professional in working in this case. That being said, obviously I believe a few things that bear explanation that aren't quite as simple as they appear on the surface. And timing is important to that, and to the best that I've been able to assemble some evidence to support those positions, I hope to bring that to you tonight, and I'll try not to talk too long. If I can, I've got some handouts I'd like to give you. I don't like to trust technology.
You want me to pass those out for you, or you got it? I was going to pass those out for you. All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as I told you, Mr. Tandrian came from New York and got involved with their church. And I'll talk a little bit more about the church in a few minutes. But his church and what he does are very involved in community service and helping the community. And in fact, that's how we got to 533 Plaza Drive in the first place. He was looking for a place to have a local church building, and he came across this location. Now, this location, interestingly enough, when he arrived there, was at one time an ambulance dispatch company, from what I understand. And it was already set up with some residential area in there for people to spend the night there and to cook and to stay in there. And in fact, again, this is not a rezoning. This is a request for a conditional use permit. Residential is an allowed use, or a permitted use, I should say, under your zoning code. Now, I understand that Mr. Callender will probably tell you that was probably not the original intent, but nonetheless, as a listed use under M1, you will find residential is a use with a conditional use permit, which is why Mr. Tandrian is here tonight. If you turn to the second page, it gives you a good overview of the property. I think you've probably seen this in some of the materials that staff has provided you. But what's important to notice is there is a considerable amount of residential properties in that area already. And in fact, if you turn to the next page, which is an overhead view, you will see that there is a large apartment complex adjacent to this property on its southern border, and that there also are apartment complexes both, I call it across the street, technically it's southeast of the property, but there's another apartment complex there, and you can just see from the overview all the residential properties that are actually in closer proximity, with the exception of the one or two maybe industrial uses actually going on in that area. The next page you have already, that's the site plan that shows how this property is situated. But I would like to put your attention on the next page, which is the floor plan. Mr. Callender showed you a copy of a moment ago. It's the one that looks like this. And what's important is, first of all, Mr. Callender is absolutely right in his report that as it currently stands, that property does not meet life safety codes. That is absolutely correct. And that's why my client has absolutely worked and got people out of there, and there's been anything but all cooperation by my client. And I think the dates are a little bit off. It looks like the complaint from code enforcement came through in March of 2022. And I have paperwork that appears that Mr. Tandrian, as early as later in that month of March, made his first attempt to himself apply for the conditional use permit. That's how I got involved, was his first attempt in March of trying to apply for this permit. He was not able to follow all the guidelines and the requests that the application required, and that's how I got brought in. Now, I will tell you, just to give you the quick story of how that issue happened, Mr. Tandrian initially was going to use this property as a church. When he got there, it was already, and this is in March of 2022, it was already equipped with 4 kitchens, multiple bathrooms, and all but set up as it is now. The top floor was completely, as I understand, as it is now. The bottom floor was already plumbed with appliances, kitchen appliances, and toilets. And in support of some of that, the next page you'll see is a Zillow listing. And in that Zillow listing, you will notice the price history shows $225.20 listed for rent and $228 listing removed. And that's when the photographs, obviously that's the only listing on here, they were posted. That is 2 years before my client bought the property. This is when there was the seller still owned the property. So certainly this was set up as a residential property. At least we can show you the top floor was. They listed it as 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths at that time. But again, the bottom floor was already finished in. Now, in full candor, the bottom floor, and we're not sure if anyone had actually ever lived in there or not, but it did have considerable damage. And Mr. Tandrian did repair all of that damage. There was some painting, some drywall work, those type of things. Did those require a permit? Possibly. But that is the only work that my client did that was done in violation of any permits. Now, again, certainly the way it is laid out right now, there's got to be some changes made to it, and we'll come back and address those in just a minute. But those were not things that my client thumbed his nose at. In any event, in March of 2022, while he was getting the place fixed up, cleaned up, a woman approached him and asked if any of those rooms were for rent. And because of what he does with his church and the mission that they serve, he felt the need, he felt a calling that was what he was supposed to do with this property. And not long after that, another lady approached him, and this woman said she didn't have any money to pay for a place to live. Now, interestingly enough, that woman is the one whose relative ended up having the warrant and caused the police to come to the scene. Of course, she was asked to leave immediately by Mr. Tandrian, is my understanding, after that happened. Nonetheless, after I got involved, spoke to Mr. Callender, worked with code enforcement, we did get everyone out of that property and move forward with this very quickly with this move to get the property into conditional use. Now, I do note, Mr. Callender mentioned at one point in there the LLC, which I referenced in the application packet, in the letter of intent. And quite simply, that LLC is what holds the real estate in that property. And that was an instruction I give to all my clients that buy real estate. Unless it's your own home that you're going to be living in, most likely you need an LLC to hold your property in for liability purposes. So that is why that got put into a separate LLC right about the same time I got involved. Now, no doubt that that's eventually going to go into a nonprofit, but as we're pressed for time at a time trying to get things right, they formed it as an LLC, which technically in Georgia automatically is going to be a for-profit enterprise. But if you can imagine renting out to the people he had rented it to at the prices that he was allowing them to pay, there was no profit being made. This was an act in the church. Going through, and I don't want to belabor too much, you'll see photographs from the inside of all 4 of these living quarters, and you will see that indeed this is not a slum or tenement situation. These are very well appointed and nice living quarters. And I know we're going backwards, but on the floor plan, you will see where my client has proposed windows to be added. There are a couple locations there you will see that show proposed windows. Obviously, any bedroom has to have a window. And Mr. Callender did make a note in his staff report as well that there are still areas that previously were listed as bedrooms that are just now rooms in there. We certainly will work with the with code compliance and city permitting to remove any walls or anything to make sure there's no issue with there being bedrooms that don't have egress in them. One thing else I wanted to show you at the end of the pictures of the lower apartments is you'll see the apartments I called across the street. Those are the ones that are to the southeast. You can see how close they are. But something else I wanted to point out is the apartments next door. Now, if you go past the page with the fence that says apartments next door, You'll see the first one I took that says apartments next door, March 2022. And you'll notice there's garbage just laying in the front of that property. Okay, that happens. The next page, and this is a Google Earth shot from June 2023. Again, there's garbage. And then the next page was taken last night, which shows different garbage. And again, there's garbage laying out front. You don't see any of that. I know there may have in the past been some issues with garbage at my client's location, but that's been cleaned up. But the point being is, there are things that happen on these properties that can be rectified, and I'm hopeful that this commission won't hold those against my client. Absolutely, the properties as they were being operated were not up to life safety codes. But that was not because my client tried to thumb his nose, and it's certainly not because my client built these with the intention of thumbing his nose. He thought he was doing the right thing. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his church, and it's important to know why he does this. They have 120 members who mainly serve the Hindu, Indo-Caribbean community. They have a belief that volunteer service to the community is an appreciation to the Lord. And because of that, they do a lot of community service. That's what my client does in a lot of his off time. And that includes things like they make breakfasts for all community members. They do different community service. They pick kids up from school that don't have rides. They take children to the doctors, to the health department that don't have insurance, and they provide those needs. And I think I've covered everything, really. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point in time. But that kind of hopefully sets up a little bit more about why we're here tonight and what my client really wants to do with this property. And again, we have all these people from his church that are supportive of the mission. The idea is that he will allow his property that he owns to be used by the church to help people get back on their feet. The church will do the things I just talked about. They will mentor them. They will help them find jobs. This will provide a stopgap measure for them while they try to find a place that they can live in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Mr. Chairman.
I have to ask if there are any questions.
I've got one. Have you or your client considered the possibility of applying for a rezoning versus a conditional use?
We have not, and I had the conversation to some degree with Mr. Callender. I don't believe that probably the staff would be supportive of a rezone to residential, and Mr. Callender can speak for himself, of course, but based on that location, I don't think we would be as successful. Again, since residential is a permitted use with a conditional use permit, it simply makes more sense to try to put this through as a conditional use permit. Again, it does abut an apartment complex on one side already, but it would provide a buffer in so much it's a smaller use than a full apartment complex as it transitions to the M1 area on the other side as well. So we believe it actually would be appropriate under the current zoning guidelines. Now, I understand that probably there's going to be a request to modify your UDO at some point to remove that, but as we stand here today, we think it would be more appropriate just to leave it as is zoned. It was a very good question. Thank you.
So the individuals that would be living there, they're temporarily,
Yes, ma'am.
short-term?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your time.
I would ask at this time if there was anyone present to speak in opposition to this request. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to deny.
Motion to deny,
Second?
and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Unanimous. The motion is denied. Item number 2 is a request for a rezone from R2 to R1A at 408 Knight Street. Mr. Code Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Believe I have, my slides are out of order. I apologize about that. So I've got the rezone here for you at 408 Knight Street. It's a pretty basic rezone request from R2 to R1A. Just like most of the core of the city, the mystery is their single-family property zoned R1, R2. I couldn't tell you why. Been zoned R2 since the city adopted zoning in 1972. But the single-family use of those properties prohibits them from being subdivided further under their R2 zoning now, requires a 5-acre minimum. So they're asking you tonight for recommendation of approval for their R1A request, and staff has also recommended approval as submitted without any conditions. It's pretty straightforward R1A request.
Is there anyone present to speak for this request? Yes, ma'am. Just come to the podium and give us your name and
Hey there, I'm Sadie Krosick, and I'm on the board of Hope Monroe. It's a local housing nonprofit, and so I'm just here to represent them for the request.
any questions for concerning this? Any questions?
Glad to see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd ask if there was anyone present to speak in opposition to this request. I see none, so I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll motion to approve.
Motion to approve
Second?
and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is approved. Item number 3, a request for a COA for parking lot improvements at 506 South Broad Street. Mr. Kodoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a pretty straightforward COA request for your corridor design overlay district. There's an existing parking lot at 506 South Broad in front of the office building there. The applicant's requesting to modify that parking, actually to improve it. They're basically inverting the parking now from being on the outer rim of the circular part of the parking design and actually putting the parking spaces on the interior. As you can see on the left side of the screen there, that shows what's proposed to be done to improve that parking lot. The request complies with all your CDO requirements, and the recommendation is approval as submitted without conditions.
Thank you, sir. Ask if anyone was present to speak for this request.
Hey, Wes Peters with 81 Investment Company, just representing the entity that owns the property. And just as Brad said, we are basically just trying to improve to, it's really cumbersome to get in and out of that parking lot currently. So this will just include a roundabout there, as you see, and just will be much more efficient.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone present to speak in opposition to this request? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve.
Move we approve.
Second.
And a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is approved. All opposed? No? Sorry. Motion is approved. Item number 4, a request for a preliminary plat approval at 319 South Madison Avenue for 8 lots. Mr. Kodoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a preliminary plat that is up for really a reapproval. This Planning Commission and City Council have already previously approved this very preliminary plat. Unfortunately, that preliminary plat expired. So they're back before Planning Commission to get their reapproval for this, to reactivate the development and to move forward with platting in the future. And it's pretty straightforward. If you're not familiar with this one's 7 townhomes, 4 fronting on South Madison Avenue and 3 other units fronting on Millage Avenue, and they're accessed from parking behind the units. And it's pretty straightforward, recommending approval as submitted, no corrections required.
Thank you. Anyone present to speak for this request?
Hello, my name is Lori Volk. My partner also is here, Bruce Henley. And as Mr. Callender said, we're just looking for a reapproval so we can continue the progress we've made on this project.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone present to speak in opposition to this request? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve,
Second.
and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion is approved. Request is approved.
Or Shauna voting.
Shawna,
We'll
vote.
just note that, Shauna, can you still hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We're just not hearing your vote.
Oh, sorry. It's approved. I'm good.
Okay. Item number 5 is a request for a preliminary plat approval for Charlotte Ralph Boulevard and Highway 11 for 6 lots. Mr. Code Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for a commercial subdivision. It's located on the northwest corner of Charlotte Rowell Boulevard and State Route 11. It's part of a previously subdivided property that's coming off Saratoga. As you can see, there are lots that are kind of grouped up along the corner of 11 and Charlotte Rowell Boulevard. And this includes a property to the west that exists now currently as a platted tract. They're proposing to build, or the road has been built, as you can see in the aerial photograph. They're proposing to dedicate that road as part of this plat process, and that will formalize basically the boundary for those lots there along the middle of the property itself, if you notice on the screen with the preliminary plat behind you. They have submitted the plat. It's in full compliance with all of our development regulations. There are no corrections required, and the recommendation is approval.
Thank you, sir. Is there someone present to speak for this request?
I think Lee, look, that's you, Lee.
This is basically a realignment project that we did several years ago, and Paul Rosenthal and I basically worked through, if you remember, the old Double Springs Road came in at a 45-degree angle, and basically what we did was realign that property to make it useful. We put in the new road recently, realigned water lines, so it's pretty much teed up now for future end users, so that's the basics of it.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ask if there was anyone present to speak in opposition to this request. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve.
Have a motion to approve
Second?
and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed, no. Motion is approved, the request is approved. Item number 6, if anyone wants to leave, you're welcome to. We're gonna take up some housekeeping stuff here.
Yeah, we're going to read 5 pages of zoning ordinance amendments. Me and Donnie are going to go back and forth on that.
Item number 6, request for a zoning ordinance, amendment number 16. Mr. Code Officer.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I am going to spare you the expense of reading all of the proposed amendment, but it is necessary due to House Bill 1405 that was approved last year, goes into effect July 1st this year. These amendments are necessary to comply with that House bill, which essentially changes the rules for quasi-judicial authorities. In this case, this planning commission acts as our only quasi-judicial authority that makes zoning decisions for your corridor design overlay. And so the amendments before you tonight, I don't have them laid out on the screen, so I just summarized them on the screen behind you. We're modifying the procedures in 643-4, the zoning ordinance that deals with compliance with those, with the House Bill 1405. This will shore up the CDO requirements for that compliance. And then we are modifying the procedures in section 1440.1. This is regarding your published notices for your corridor design commission, which is the planning commission. We're shoring that up with the language to comply with 1405. And lastly, there are public hearing procedures and appeal procedures that we are adding in section 1440. We're adding an entire section 1446 to the zoning ordinance to deal with that. I'll spare the commission in reading all of the proposed amendments, but these were prepared in order to get the city in compliance with the House bill that passed last year. It's a little wonky. I have my own complaints about this House bill, but I'll spare this commission those complaints. But this is to Essentially, anything that's being made outside the city council's purview has to comply with these requirements, which extends actually the public notification and the public notification requirements, and it creates new avenues for appeals for bodies such as Planning Commission that make decisions. I think that put it in a nutshell, Donnie. You can tell me if I'm wrong or not.
No, I think you got it right. You're
Okay.
good.
But that's pretty much it. The recommendation obviously is approval for these amendments to get the ordinance in compliance. That's all that I have.
Thank you. So it's up to us to approve.
Yeah, you're making a recommendation to city council whether or not to approve these amendments.
Okay. Has everybody had a chance to sort of look over these? Any questions concerning these?
What would happen if we did not approve them?
That was my question.
There will be a failure on the city's part to comply with House Bill 1405. And so that there can end up being challenges to the city in the future, and Donnie can expand on this if he'd like, but I would think if we don't comply with those amendments under 1405, if we're ever challenged in our zoning ordinance, this would be part of the onion that would get peeled away that could render our ordinance completely.
Yes, I mean, he's right in the sense that if we don't adopt what is being essentially mandated that we adopt, then zoning decisions that we would make that would be in connection with these changes could essentially end up being overturned if anybody ever challenged them.
Just curious.
It's a good question.
Good question.
The only thing I can say is I look at this, and 30 years ago, if we'd have had these, we'd have been a lot happier today, but oh, here we are. So I'm glad to be where we are today. We had no guidance years ago.
Any other questions? That being said, I'll entertain a motion to
Might want
approve
to
or
offer the
deny.
public a chance to speak for or against the amendments.
Well, that's true. We've already spoken for the.
Did you already, I must have,
So I guess I need to,
okay, I don't think you asked the public to speak on that.
I did not.
You're welcome to do it, the public that's
If
here.
there's anyone present to speak for or against this amendment, please come forward. Okay,
That way the minutes will reflect that, the public
Seeing
had a
none.
chance.
seeing none, now I'll entertain a motion.
I will motion that we approve to the council. We recommend approval to the council, rather.
Motion to recommend to the council that we approve. And a second, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, it is approved unanimously. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Move in a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Aye.